screaming in before we officially get started. If you guys were here for our post-game shows last year, we're back in the exact same spot, baby. Right by kind of the little food ordering kiosks here by section 128. So this is where we do our post-game shows after the game wraps up, Broncos country. So be sure to look forward to that throughout the course of the entire regular season. The Denver Broncos defeated the Arizona Cardinals today. Absolutely walloped them in the preseason finale, 38-12. A lot of really good things to go over for the Denver Broncos. Zach Wilson is definitely towards the top of that list. A lot of the young rookies as well, I thought, played really, really well. Lavelle Bailey with that pick six towards the end of the game. This was a really fun game to watch. One of the most fun preseason finales that I've seen in a long time. We've got Maverick in the house. Good to see you, man. Hopefully you are doing well. Glad that you were here to catch us for the post-game show. I know you were not able to make it for the pre-game show. So I guess let's just go ahead and get started with Zach Wilson, Broncos country, because the dude was lights out. He was delivering the ball, going through his progressions, letting his feet lead him with his progressions, and he was accurate. Had a couple of kind of shaky plays towards the beginning, but overall, I thought that Zach Wilson had one of his best games in general, like in the NFL as a whole. I thought that he made some beautiful throws. The two hole shots were just chef's kiss. Absolutely gorgeous. We've got Relio in the house saying, bring it on Seahawks. We got KBS in the house saying, finally got to see Troy Franklin. Yes, we did. Troy Franklin did get a couple of looks today, which was very good for him. He needed to get some good film out there, and I thought that overall he did that today. The homie Bailey got the pick six beautifully. Yeah, that was a hell of a read by Bailey, and it was just a hell of a play, man. Hell of a run back. Loved it all across the board, and it fired up the stadium. The energy in here on that pick six was absolutely insane. Before that, fans were doing the wave, and then afterwards, fans got immediately re-engaged in the game. Zach Wilson, QB2, hands down. We'll talk about that. I still think ultimately Jarrett Stidham will be QB2, but Zach Wilson has definitely made the team. They're going to carry three quarterbacks. Mark my words, they will carry three quarterbacks. I still think that Jarrett Stidham's the guy you want to come in an emergency situation. He's kind of your ideal backup, but Zach Wilson put out some really good film today. Broncos have a decision to make on Brandon Johnson. Johnson was absolutely insane. Obviously had that really nice catch on the turkey hole shot from Wilson. They definitely have a decision to make in the back end of their roster when it comes to who's going to make their team at the wide receiver position. They've got some guys. Brandon Johnson, Michael Bandy, Little Jordan Humphrey, Jalen Virgil. And I mean, if you have a wide receiver on the practice squad, you can promote him to the active roster. So it's almost essentially like the wide receiver would have a spot on the active roster. This was the second best preseason game after the Raiders and the 49ers. Yeah, I would agree. This was a really fun game. I thought that overall we saw a lot of highlight plays. Zach Wilson, we'll just go ahead and talk about him right now. It started off a little bit rough when it comes to Zach. He was missing reads. He was inaccurate, holding on to the ball too long. But as we got into the game, he started to get more comfortable out there. You could tell with his feet. His feet were a lot more comfortable out there, and he was actually going through his progressions and let his feet lead him. One, not open. Okay, bam, shift my feet to two, not open. All right, shift my feet to three, bam, it's open. Zip it on the backside dig, first down. Seeing Zach Wilson actually go through his progressions was probably the most encouraging thing that I saw out of him today. He had the big splash plays, obviously. The two hole shots were just gorgeous. But Zach Wilson is a guy who really needed to put that good tape out there, and he did. Do I feel like he's going to be QB2 for this team? I don't think so. And the reason why is because you still have those inconsistent plays where sometimes he'll put the ball in harm's way. He had a screen pass today where he threw it literally into the belly of the defensive lineman. So I think that those are the plays that Sean Payton doesn't want to live with. He couldn't live with it last year with Russell Wilson. I don't think he wants to live with that as your backup quarterback. Mavericks with the Zach Wilson stat line, 16 for 25, 251 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air. He also had a rushing touchdown today on a QB sneak, so Zach Wilson did have the hat trick, 3 touchdowns on the day. Could one of the mods please get rid of that bot? I would really appreciate it. Rayanne says Seahawks better watch out. For sure, man. Obviously, the Seahawks are a team that has got a really, really sound defense with new head coach Mike McDonald. They've got one of the most versatile defensive schemes, so it's going to be a good test for Bo Nix making his first start. But with the way that this Broncos team looks like they have solid depth, they're playing well, they're coached well, I don't see why Denver couldn't go into Seattle week 1 and get a win. I really don't. They should have gone into Seattle in 2022 week 1 and gotten a win. They would have if Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams didn't fumble at the goal line, and of course if Nathaniel Hackett didn't botch the end of the game. That's, in my opinion, all the proof that you need that the Broncos are a team that can go into Seattle and challenge them. Yes, it was obviously a different iteration of the Broncos 2 years ago, but I feel like a Sean Payton-led Broncos team could go in there and challenge them a hell of a lot better than the Nathaniel Hackett-led team did. I think we might keep Jared at 2 and get rid of Zach for a pick. I don't know about that. I think that the way Zach Wilson played today, he secured his spot on the roster. I just think that he's going to be QB3, but he will be on the active roster. He will dress on game days, but God forbid if Bo Nix goes down, hopefully we don't have to see the backup quarterback at all except for in garbage time during a blowout. That's the only time I hope we have to see a backup. But in the event that we do have to see a backup for maybe 1 or 2 games, Jarrett Stidham's the guy that I think we're going to look towards because he can come in, he can run the offense, he can get the ball where it needs to go. Not saying Zach can't, but I think it's just more clean and more consistent with the operation with Jarrett, and that's what you want in a backup quarterback. I believe in Zach, and I believe in his talent, but I still think he's QB3 right now. That's just where I sit. Our first 5 games are tough. They are tough, but the way that this team has responded, I think that they're ready to start shocking the world a little bit in these 5 games. We'll see Tuesday who the Broncos will go with. Yep, and I think that cuts might start a little bit sooner than that. I think that the cuts could easily start tomorrow. We saw teams that played yesterday that were already cutting dudes today, so would not be surprised at all if we already started to see some of the cuts. As far as guys who I don't think will make it at this point in time, Art Green, I think Thomas Incoom, although he had a pretty decent game today, but he had a couple of penalties. Really, things have started to fade off for Thomas Incoom, and Dondre Tillman has played a lot better at the edge. He might lock up the practice squad edge spot. I think Thomas Yasmin's kind of a cut candidate. Frank Crum is possibly a cut candidate. And these are all guys that I don't think even make the practice squad. There are others as well. I think Quentin Newsome is one that might be a cut candidate. Yeah, man, it's going to be some tough decisions to make for sure. It's going to be some really tough decisions. I want September 8th to come so fast. I'm so hyped, 100%. I think everybody is at this point. Everybody's excited to see what the true iteration of the Sean Payton Broncos are going to look like. Obviously, last year, the Russell Wilson year just doesn't count. It limited so much stuff of what Sean Payton wanted to do that I really consider this year the true year 1 of the Sean Payton era. I think they try to sneak Blake Watson onto the practice squad, but I think some other team will steal him. That's where things are going to get tough, I feel like, because Blake Watson and Tyler Beatty both played well today. I think right now Beatty might have the edge, but Watson is the guy that is going to be tough to let go because just like you said, if they put him on waivers, it's going to be likely that some other team scoops him up. But I don't think you can exactly discard Tyler Beatty either after the way that he played today. One running back that I'm kind of surprised that we didn't see in this game was Samaje Perine. I was anticipating this would be a showcase game for Samaje Perine to showcase him for other teams to potentially trade him. That didn't happen. Samaje was actually inactive today. He didn't dress. So I don't know if this means that the Denver Broncos are keeping Samaje Perine or if they are indeed going to move off from him and they just didn't want to to get him injured in this game. It's going to be very interesting because Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, and Javonte Williams, I feel like are all ahead of Samaje Perine right now on the depth chart. So it's going to be really tough to see if the Broncos do indeed try to keep four pure running backs, plus, of course, the fullback in Michael Burton. They could. I'm very surprised, though, that Samaje Perine did not play because he's been on the roster bubble for the last 2 weeks. Every Broncos pundit that you ask, from the Mike Klisses to the Cecil Lammies to me, all of us have pretty much said the same thing, that Samaje Perine is not going to make the team. But the fact that he didn't play definitely is interesting to me, and it bears monitoring for sure. As far as the backup offensive line, I thought that they played certainly better today. We didn't see as many protection breakdowns. We didn't see as many holding calls, stupid pre-snap penalties. I'm going to have to go back and watch the tape before I can say for certainty, but I do feel at least more comfortable about the backup offensive line than I did last week. And penalties in general is something that I felt like got cleaned up in this game. We saw way too many penalties during the last 2 preseason games. The Broncos were able to really clean that up. We had some penalties today, but it was a much more reasonable number that I didn't have to record how many we had by looking at the Jumbotron. Last week it was 10 penalties for, I believe it was 13 penalties, 120 yards. Today it was a lot cleaner and a lot smoother. Overall, the 3 games we played, we scored 99 points and an average of 33 per game. That's insane, man. And that just goes to show that this offense is moving the ball. Sean Payton is putting them in position to be successful. Last year, the Broncos were put in position from a coaching perspective to be successful, but the players on the field just didn't execute it. This year, things are different. This year, the coaching is sound, and the players are actually executing what the play call is. I mean, at this point, that's all you can really ask for at this phase of the offseason. How do you react to that pick six? Haven't had that in a while. That was fun. That was certainly fun. The entire stadium went nuts. Before that play, the stadium was kind of starting to get a little bit disengaged, but after that play, the stadium erupted. Fans were doing a wave before that. The wave immediately stopped. Everybody was super excited, and I was just excited for Lavelle Bailey. He's been a guy who has made a lot of plays in training camp and is currently making a case to make this team. I think that Lavelle Bailey could push out Justin Sternad. I know the Broncos really like what Sternad brings on special teams, but Bailey has been so good on defense that it might be hard to part ways with somebody like that. So definitely really impressed with Lavelle Bailey. That pick six was awesome. We also got to talk about Keidron Smith, man. This man was involved in a turnover in each week of the preseason, interception in the first 2 weeks, and then today he had a fumble recovery. Dude, guys like Keidron Smith, the way that he's playing, it makes it also really hard for the Broncos to keep him off of this roster. With their depth at corner right now, I don't think Smith makes the active roster, but he could very easily be a practice squad candidate. The problem is, obviously, if you're to put Smith on waivers, there's no doubt that some other team out there, their pro personnel department, is going to be watching that, and they'll be like, okay, we're going to scoop up Keidron Smith right away. We know what this cat can do. He's got all kinds of potential. So the Broncos, for that reason alone, might have to find a spot for him on the active roster. It's just going to be really tough because right now at corner, you've obviously got Pat Surtain, Riley Moss, Levi Wallace. One thing that might have opened the door for Smith, though, Damari Mathis went down with an injury today. It was on the first defensive drive. It was an ankle injury of some kind. We don't know what it was. He had to be carted off the field today. So first of all, I hope that Damari Mathis is okay because he had a really damn good camp and was playing really well in the preseason. But Keidron Smith might have been able to get a roster spot with this Damari Mathis injury. And then, of course, you're going to have Jaquan McMillan as your starting nickel. So right now, your depth at corner is really good. And I think now the Broncos are actually a little bit thankful to have a guy like Keidron Smith with Damari Mathis going down the way that he did. Again, hopefully Mathis is okay. We saw some other injuries today. Darrell Nachani went down with a hamstring injury. Philip Dorsett went down with some sort of leg injury. We saw Alec Mock get shaken up towards the end of the game, but I think he's going to be okay. Looks like he just kind of gotten shook up a little bit. So we did see some injuries today. The Cardinals had some injuries as well. One of their offensive linemen had to get carted off after Desmond Ridder rolled up on him. Dondre Tillman came in, hit Ridder late. It ended up being roughing the passer, and then Ridder went down with a concussion on that play, and then the offensive lineman got rolled up on, and he had to be carted off the field. So both teams did have to deal with a couple of injuries in this game, which is absolutely unfortunate. You never want to see injuries, especially in the final preseason game, especially to guys like Darrell Nachani, to guys like Philip Dorsett, who are trying to fight to make this team right now. Just really unfortunate stuff. And then obviously the Cardinals linemen who got carted off, and then Damari Mathis as well. Just really tough stuff there. Wish nothing but the best for all those injured players today. Sternad had that nice hit to force that fumble, though. Man, this is going to be tough. It is. And that's why I'm glad that I'm not paid to make these decisions. We can make our projections, certainly, as to how this 53-man roster is going to look. But the reality is, we don't know how the team is thinking internally. We don't know who's standing out in the meeting rooms and the classroom. We don't know about that. So I think that those decisions are going to be made based on both what we've seen publicly on tape as well as what's going on behind closed doors. The new punter looks good too. I think Riley Dixon's probably going to win the starting job there. I think that it's just consistency with Dixon. He's more consistent with his ball placements. Sometimes Trenton Gill mishits. That's been an issue for him, even dating back to his Chicago days. So I think that it's going to be Riley Dixon. Zach needs to be the backup. Coaching really matters. I'll say what I said earlier about Zach. Zach Wilson is okay. Here's the good comparison between Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson. Jarrett Stidham is your 2007 Toyota Corolla. It's reliable, it's efficient, and it's going to get you to your intended destination when you get there. It may not be perfect, it may not be aesthetically pleasing. Compare that to Zach Wilson, who is like an old Ferrari. He may be more flashy, and he may get you there 2 times as fast, but he also has the potential for his engine to blow up and for him to break down. That's, I feel like, the comparison between Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham. Who do you think would make the better backup quarterback in this situation? I'm personally going to go with the more reliable option, and that's the 2007 Toyota Corolla. That's just me, and that's probably the same line of thinking Sean Payton's going to have. Because first of all, like I said earlier, we do not want to see our backup quarterback at all this year, save for blowouts. But if we do have to see our backup quarterback for a game, we want the guy who's going to be less flashy but can at least execute the offense, do what he's asked to do, and not leave plays on the field like Zach Wilson sometimes does. I feel like Zach Wilson did a great job of closing that gap between him and Stidham this offseason. And I think that Zach Wilson has a very bright future in Denver and in the NFL. And I do think that he makes a roster as the third quarterback. But right now, in terms of who's going to go into the game for a backup quarterback, the guy I'm going to take there is Jarrett Stidham, your 2007 Toyota Corolla, your reliable option. That is kind of my thought process there. KBS says you take the Ferrari, of course. Well, it depends on how bad you need to get to work that day. If you really need to get to work that day, then then maybe you take the Corolla, but we'll see. Does this mean we keep 3 quarterbacks? Yes, I do believe that we're going to keep 3 quarterbacks, and honestly, I feel like this competition has been a sham ever since the beginning. I feel like Sean Payton has always known what his quarterback rotation is going to be. He always knew Bo Nix was going to be the starter from the moment they drafted him. He knew that Jarrett Stidham would be the reliable, safe backup that he's looking for, and Zach Wilson is the fun, young project quarterback who is a developmental piece that the Broncos can maybe flip later on for assets. He's a guy who's here for football rehab and makes a perfect QB3. The Broncos love this quarterback room. Sean Payton made that explicitly clear in his press conference on Friday, that the Broncos love that room. But I still feel like right now, just in terms of who's your more reliable QB2, it's going to be Jarrett Stidham. The defense was physical. Some hard hits and roughing the passer calls. Yeah, man, they were really nasty, Rodney. I thought that it's good to see that brand of football here in Denver. You can live without the penalties. You can live without roughing the passers, of course. But seeing this physical brand of defense where they're not afraid to hit you, not afraid to get in your face, not afraid to be aggressive up front, I love seeing that from Vance Joseph. I really do. This is something that was sorely lacking, especially in the early part of last year. When the Broncos started to transition to a more aggressive, physical brand of defense, that's when we saw the turnovers happen, and that was when the 5-game winning streak happened. So I'm really happy to see this team play a more physical brand of defense. Keyrine's gone since he didn't play. I don't know. That's kind of the perplexing thing to me. I thought that Keyrine was for sure going to play today, but ultimately he didn't. He was inactive. So I don't know if the Broncos are kind of trying to pull a fast one on the media here and keep him, or if they just didn't want him to get hurt in this game and still try to trade him. I don't know. I really don't have a good answer for you there. Yes, the defense did play like they did in their win streak. Ritter took a hit and his helmet flew off. Yeah, that was a nasty hit, man. Dondre Tillman came in and absolutely smoked Ritter, and I felt bad for the poor offensive lineman who was next to Ritter, because Tillman comes in, slams Ritter to the ground, and the offensive lineman gets rolled up on, and he had to get carted off the field. That was not a good look, man. But again, you love to see the Broncos play that physical brand of defense, and like I talked about with Dondre Tillman, man, he's been really good. Zach Wilson's talent is obviously better than Bo Nix. I will say Zach Wilson does have a better arm than Bo Nix. Absolutely. But what separates them is the mental side of the game. Bo Nix has the mental side of the game about as mastered as you can for a rookie. Zach Wilson is in his 4th year in the NFL and is still struggling with the mental side of the game. So that, for me, is where it separates. Just because you have arm talent doesn't mean you can play the quarterback position. Now, I think Zach Wilson has shown that he can play the quarterback position, but there's still some inconsistencies, man. There's just those little inconsistencies. I think that Zach Wilson has great potential to be a good long-term backup quarterback here in Denver and maybe even be a starter again in the NFL. But right now, no, not good enough, man. This is year 4 for Zach. He was drafted in 2021. What do you think of Seattle's defense and what Mike Macdonald will bring against our offense week 1? All right, this is going to be really tough because Mike Macdonald has a very exotic defense. Just the bunch of different fronts they can show you, the different looks they can give in the secondary, and then at the snap they can rotate out of it. They can bail defensive linemen out in coverage. All kinds of different disguises that Mike Macdonald has. That's going to be really tough. I think that this is probably one of the toughest tests that Bo Nix is going to make or is going to get all season long, man. I think this Mike Macdonald defense is going to be really, really tough. The good news is it's going to be their first game executing it as a unit. So there will be some mistakes that are just naturally going to happen from Seattle. I'm going to be looking for Bo Nix to take advantage of those mistakes. We saw Zach Wilson take advantage of mistakes from the defense today when they blew a couple of coverages. I want to see Bo Nix do that when there's inevitably going to be some mistakes, some growing pains in the first game of this new defense up in Seattle. So that's what I'm going to be watching for, absolutely. 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. This is year 4 for Zach. Can't wait to see PS2 versus DK Metcalf. Yeah, that's going to be sweet. That is going to be sweet. Of course, DK Metcalf is a guy who can out-physical you at the line of scrimmage, and Pat Surtain's one of the most physical corners out there. Is it time to head out?
Well, we're clearance call.
Okay, cool. I'm going to head out. No, we're good. Thank you. All right, guys, we're getting kicked out. All right, guys, let's head outside. We're going to start wrapping up this stream here. McDonald's defensive tactics will definitely give us problems, not to mention the game's being played in a tough place, for sure. Seattle's obviously one of the toughest places to go and make your first start as a rookie. But by the same token, Bo Nix has played in the SEC before. And you ask almost any player who's played in the SEC, and they'll tell you that 90% of SEC stadiums like LSU, Alabama, those are louder than most NFL stadiums, even than Seattle is. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough test, but knowing that Bo Nix is able to handle that kind of stuff, I have no issue with it. All right, Broncos country, I'm going to dip out of here. We're about at the 25-minute mark. I'm going to head back down towards the train. Thank you guys so much for tuning in for this post-game stream. I really appreciate it. Once we get back home in the studio, we will be going through and doing a proper post-game video, breaking down stats, highlights, all that good stuff. So be sure to look forward to that. Wasn't able to do it last week because I did not get home until super duper late. But today, obviously, that's not going to be an issue. So we will be doing that video as soon as we get home. All right, Broncos country, before we dip out of here, please be sure to leave a like on the stream as well as subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are both free and easy ways to show your support. It helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out and helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, I'm your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.